Good afternoon, everybody. And so we continue our exploration of the Vedic vision. There are many files waiting, and I do not know with which to start and which to end, but I will go by intuition, so to say, and select the material which seemed to be more important than the other in that moment of time. While listening to these bhakti songs and this wonderful presentation on bhakti in general, what came to my mind is a thing very different from the bhakti movement. I understood that we always try to explain to our surface consciousness things which are not on the surface. We always do this exercise. Basically, we explain to our surface mind things which are not understood otherwise. So mind has to know it somehow, and the vital has to feel it somehow, and to know, to translate it in its own terms. It can be done in many different ways, in symbolic language, in conceptual language. We can find other forms of explaining something to the mind, to our manas, sense mind. And until we do this, successfully, we do not know what we are talking about. We may have very interesting experiences, but even those will not be understood until we explain this to the surface mind. It's a strange thing. So, and I have a question, by the way. Why should we do it? Why that should be this way? Who arranged this particular movement? What is the purpose of making our outer being aware of our inner movements? It's a big question, and most probably the whole summer school of Indian psychology is trying to answer that question. Why do we need these explanations for the surface mind? And only then, when the surface mind understands, first recognizes the language, the symbols, learns how to use them, then only something happens, and it can align the whole outer being to the inner experience, and then the change takes place. Then inner experience becomes a part of our reality. By the way, this faculty of explaining to our surface mind was assigned in the Vedas, in the Vedic vision, to the word, to the faculty of the word. And the word was not only the servant or the reflection of the mind, as it was later in Sankhya. The word was an independent faculty of consciousness. And maybe you noticed also with your experience, I noticed with mine, that I can say sometimes things which make me wonder. Did you have this experience with yourself? You say certain things which make more sense to you than you had it before you said it. Suddenly you see the picture you didn't have before. You were starting with intuition. Certain intuition was there, but the clarity, the vision was not there. So when you end your speech, you see the picture. Your mind knows, you know. So what really happened then in that time? How can you say something you didn't know before? It's an interesting thing. So on this vision of the word, the whole Vedic paradigm is built. There is the word which carries the power or the vision which mind does not have. And when mind is dwelling on it, something happens. There is some change in consciousness takes place, because the outer consciousness is aligned with the inner experience. Does it make sense? Definitely. Since we always try to convince our outer consciousness with something which we have inside, convince is a wrong word. To communicate to the outer consciousness something which we have inside. If we have little inside, there is little communication. Yeah? Many times we don't have much to say. We're just bubbling things which are outside. But once in a while, this happens, and we have something to say, and then we are waiting for the word. We do not have yet that expression. So what we do really inside, we become completely still, absolutely attentive, and in that stillness and silence we wait for the word to come to explain to our mind in the most efficient way what we felt inside. All poetry is built on this, yes, poetic expression. All mantras are of that kind, that they communicate something which cannot be easily communicated to the surface consciousness. How it takes place, it's an interesting thing. I think it's a very psychological thing. It's an alignment with some higher reality within yourself, and then waiting for the word. By the way, tantric explanation is very valid here. There is a pashyanti vak, yes, the flash of intuition. When you know already, but you don't have words. You already feel it, it is overwhelming you, but you do not know what it is yet. Until you start building it in words, in sentences, in language, you start dressing it into language, and once it is completely dressed, then the mind can attend, the surface mind. Through language it can understand. You're very right. It is not restricted only to the language as we know it as a verbal language. There can be any other language. The flash of intuition may come and how to say, if you are not in the verbal environment, yes, explaining it, but you are an artist or the dancer or musician, you will use another language, mathematician. You will use mathematics to explain that flash which came. And you will dress that intuition, that pashyanti vak still. You will dress into the language suitable for that environment in which you are. So there will be a composition of a higher kind. There will be a painting of a different kind. There will be a beautiful and very sincere presentation of drama. The whole life, all the aspects of it are coming from those flashes and are being dressed in this language of life. Many kinds of languages. So, but these languages are already translating that thing to the surface consciousness. That surface consciousness, surface mind can recognize them and, how to say, make its own, so to say. Yes.
There's a philosopher and psychologist, he was at the University of Chicago, named Eugene Genler, who, in his philosophy, he was a phenomenologist, but he looked at the formation of meaning in a similar kind of way. He didn't look at it so much in terms of a higher mind, but he looked at implicit versus explicit functioning, and that he developed a form of psychotherapy based on that called focusing. But then at the end of his life now, but his latest thing was to develop a way of thinking that he called thinking at the edge, which means going into that place of sensing something there, but not having the words for it, and just waiting for the words to come. It's a very interesting thing that I think captures some of what you're talking about.
Most probably these are very simple things, only we never kind of made them clear to our surface mind. And we all know them because we always operate through this in this way. We are waiting for the word to be most expressive of something we want to communicate. And in Tantric tradition, Pashyanti Vak is that Ichha Shakti. Yeah? It represents Ichha Shakti, the power of will, of intention. There is a beautiful explanation of Abhinavagupta where he gives levels of Ichha Shakti. He says there are Pashyantis of different kind. Smaller, bigger Mahapashyantis which are increasing and reaching to Sadashiva and beyond, to the Lord. And he gives very simple examples. For example, he says, I go to the village. But in order to go to the village, to this intention to take place, I have to close my house, to prepare this, to take food. Many smaller Pashyantis, many smaller intentions have to be realized before I go to the village. Now, this intention to go to the village includes many more. But this intention to go to the village is not the end of the story. The picture may enlarge. Why should I go to the village? Because of something. And that is because of something else. And the picture grows. And it includes the whole manifestation in one intention to manifest something. Just look at this beautiful picture. We just see one flesh, which belongs to us, to this particular presentation. But this flesh is in the complex of all other great movements in cosmos, which we also represent. We are ripples on this ocean, and all the ripples are necessary to make it true, to manifest something which that thing wants to manifest. It's a beautiful picture. And very simple. There is nothing really beyond or some mystic. I mean, there is no mysticism in it.
What is the term for intentions?
Ichha Shakti. It's a will. Wish, actually, wish. There is a wish, there is a need. There is something which wants to be, wants to take place in this context. By the way, when I was a student in St. Petersburg University in the linguistic department, that was my major, was my linguistics, general and theoretical linguistics. I always wondered, and many times I asked my professors about this strange thing. Why do we say what we say? And who really decides? Why is that taking place? For example, now we are all sitting here. There is a particular context in which we all are gathered. And I, or not I, but something wants to come through and be communicated. Through me, through you. Something is coming up. What is this? Why this and not something else in this moment of time? Is it a valid question to you? For me it was very important. And I called it for myself imperativeness of the name. It's an old thing, but it is very interesting to look from the distance now. Imperativeness of the name. There's something which wants to be manifested. And it comes in a particular formation, takes me and my language, and with whatever skills I can do, I can really give it an embodiment. And by that I change the context. In context which was here 5 minutes before is a different context now. We are tuned to another reality. Slowly we are tuned to another reality. It's an interesting perspective. We are all changing this context with our thoughts, with these flashes. So the word is manifesting the reality. It brings something which wasn't there before and changes the context, always building up the outer reality. If you have a glimpse of it, it would be very interesting.
When you say that something wants to be manifested through me in this environment, then there is an assumption that the source of intention is somewhere else and you are the instrument. But why do we need to take this assumption? Why can't you start with the premise that source of intention is you yourself?
I will tell you why. Because I feel that it is not me already. So that's why I say it so. If I would feel that it is me who is changing all the time, going around doing things, then I would be just ordinary as everybody else feels this and does it. We all do this. But I feel that it is really, there is a gap. It's actually, truly speaking, not totally me. Me because I'm doing it, but not me in the sense that I am also benefiting from it. Oh, definitely. No, it's not about words. It is about the word. At the beginning was the word. It's about that word, and not words. Yes, right. Yes.
You have a student point of view, like all the knowledge is within the student, so you just it evokes, evokes the exact what we needed.
Right.
At the time, but if what we need to hear, it will come through you.
Right.
And then a bit like say Mozart wrote God's music for the people. They don't like Beethoven say that, and Beethoven wrote his own music. For God. They don't know what was right and the wrong music for God. Mozart was just an instrument. So if they know like that the thing is that all knowledge is in with everything. So everything is available, but we don't need to hear the music from you. We need to hear about it.
Right.
So that's what we hoped, and it's a pure instrument then comes through you.
Right. Not only through me, through all of us. Once we are building together the context, you are influencing my thinking and I'm influencing your perception. We are both ways doing. We are all participants of this context. If you block it, I will not be able to have it. Yeah? If you open it, I may have something I will never be able to have on my own. So there's something very mysterious about it. In this communication taking place. And definitely as psychotherapists you know this. You may learn from your patients a lot about yourself. And one has to be open to that learning also. So this word, yes? And that is free will. That is real free will. All the rest is just camouflage for it. This, Pashyanti Vak, this is the free will.
Is it free will of something mysterious or my own free will?
Later you realize that that mysterious who is not you, because you identify with your outer consciousnness, is actually you, who is the inner being. But I don't want to say it too soon, because then I lose this, depth of it. And it looks all the same. We use the same words, it sounds the same. It is actually that you whom you do not know now in this outer consciousness. And that's why you feel as if it is not you. But definitely it is you.
That is in some creative moments it does happen, as if that is being written or that is being spoken. But not every time, like I do have I am the agent of my speech.
Yes, if we speak things which we prepared and we want to read it out, that would be something of the kind. But if you are to be true to this moment of time and to allow that thing to happen, to take place, then something else is happening. it requires courage, because you will be off your ground, so you will have to always find a new ground. You have to have faith in that the ground will be found. You have to have faith in that word which will come. You do not know what is on the way yet, so you have to trust it and to let it come. It's a little bit it's like an exercise. You have to exercise this. Yes? Yeah, please say. It comes, so you say. Yeah.
I just want to say, in the Western tradition, some hermeneutic thinkers have talked about that, because they see understanding as involving a true dialogue. And when we have a true dialogue, we have to sort of get out of our ego and surrender into the truth of what hasn't yet emerged. So it requires a lot of character, a lot of courage.
I learned about this in Auroville, by the way. This is the very place where you can learn these things. And also from the Veda. In the Veda it is interestingly said about it, that the rishis are always expressing the word of a new, how to put it, a new word. And the forces of crookedness which obstruct this word are always referring to the authority of the word of the old. The old word, which was once new and fresh, becomes an obstruction, becomes a weapon in the hands of the forces of crookedness. What does it really mean? Just think about it. It's really an insight into something. How the word becomes the weapon against a new word coming through. New word means actual presentation of consciousness in this moment of time. So the word with authority, with power from before, comes to obstruct it. It happens all the time, true.
There is a concept, it happens in science as well. There is a concept like theory readiness of observation. So whatever we observe is always obstructed by the theory which is already known to us. So when we observe something, then the meaning of a particular word, in this example, may also change in course of time. So the meaning which I have currently and the meaning which I may discover in future, if I do not bring in this meaning in my course of exploration, but this meaning which I already know comes in between and hides the meaning which I may discover in course of my exploration. So theory obstructs the observation.
It's a very good observation, by the way. And it is so, and that is the dialectics. So basically we use the language which we already know, and we are changing it all the time. We are changing the context in which we are thinking. So we, with our new word, have to be stronger than the environment in which we are going to express it. We have to modify it. We have to modulate it, even change it. Change the meanings, bring new words. And the rishis, as in the Veda said, discovered new names. What does it mean? New names they discovered. Names which had no place yet before, so they had to bring new concepts, new forces, and new knowledge. So I would like in this first part to give you an overview of the shift of paradigms, and in the second part to go straight into the presentation on the Vedic paradigm. In the previous presentation I stopped nearly at the end, and I didn't cover one big portion which is very important, but which is beyond Vedic paradigm, but important for the integral paradigm of knowledge. And that was my comparison of faculties and verities, the difference between the faculties of consciousness and verities of the qualities of psychic being. Now, it's an interesting thing to think about, that we have faculties of consciousness such as sight, hearing, touch, word, mind, feeling, emotions. We have many different faculties which can be categorized in 6 major faculties, but as it is done in ancient Vedanta, annam pranam chakshuk shrotram mano vacham iti. This is the definition by Bhrigu from Taittiriya. What is Brahman? Brahman is the 6 major faculties. But though we speak about consciousness in abstract terms as a concept, something which perceives, we never specify what it does, whether it sees or it hears or it really attends, senses it, attends through the holding the image of things. So I was bringing this samjnana, ajnana, vijnana, prajnana to show you the operations of consciousness which are then projected in the faculties and seen in the faculties how they work. But there is one more level of psychology which is profound and very different, and that is these verities or the qualities of the psychic being, such as eternal dharmas, as Sri Aurobindo calls them, sincerity, humility, gratitude, perseverance, aspiration for the divine, courage for the divine, receptivity. What about receptivity? Where would you place it? The sense of progress, goodness, generosity, equality, peace. What are these? These are not the faculties. No, I just invite you to think. It's really something to think about. So all these faculties or these verities or the qualities of the psychic being, they have to come through our faculties. The mind can be sincere, can be courageous, can be aspiring, can be humble, can be grateful. So all these like colors of the rainbow, they are all defining the qualities of our faculties. I'm speaking of the mind. The same with the speech, the same with the sight and hearing. With all these 6 faculties, in the same way, you can have these qualities of the psychic changing their functionality, making them more and more perceptive, more and more receptive, more effective, more profound in their actions. Now, this division on the faculties and verities will explain all Adhyatmic approach to consciousness. Adhyatmic is that what we call psychological today. Adhyatmic is psychological in India today, no? Adhyatmic. Yes, in a way they are associated with the will. It's a good guess. Actually, they represent the psychic will, or the psychic presence within these faculties, within the mind, vital and physical. It is the action of the psychic through these verities. It acts through them. And if all of them are present within one consciousness, it can manifest the divine. But if some some verities are not present, for example, man doesn't have some of them, doesn't have peace, or doesn't have goodness, he is even sincere, even aspiring, even courageous, but has no goodness in him, then the whole thing may take some other form. So we all lack certain faculties, and we have to develop all of them to be totally and harmoniously developed. Maybe why I'm mentioning it, though it is beyond the scope of Vedic psychology, because it is really leading us towards some integral view on man and psychology in general. It is that part which was somehow not fully expressed in the Veda, because it was maybe not time, I do not know. I have no idea why. So now I'm going to this, so to say, I finished with my presentation from the previous time, introducing verities. Now I'm going to finish with the epistemological paradigm and shift of paradigm in time. So we saw the Sankhyayic paradigm where all the faculties were dependent on the manas, on the sense mind, which was interpreting them. It's a scientific paradigm of today. Yeah? There's someone, some brain or some kind of mind, which is interpreting the inputs of senses. It is by the mind we see, by the mind we hear, says Yajnavalkya in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, and that is the essence of Sankhyayic paradigm. In the Vedantic paradigm, these faculties are independent from the mind. In fact, mind is one of those. And manas is not the sense mind only, but has many levels. From the supermind down on every level, supermind, overmind, intuitive mind, and so on. All the levels of the mind up to the physical mind. And the same with the sight. There is the supreme sight. And we saw the faculties and the operations of consciousness, how they are hiding those faculties within the supramental operations, secret operations of the supramental consciousness, 4 of them. So all of them have gradations, so to say, all the indriyas as known in Sankhya were in the Vedanta were treated differently, independently, as the faculties of consciousness. So to say, it was more universal approach to consciousness, where individual was utilizing them, or individual was rather used by them. He didn't have that strong ahankara to think that it is he who really thinks and chooses for himself. He felt the presence of these faculties much deeper than his ahamkara was present. And that's the answer to your question, how do you know, why don't you think that it is you who is doing it? Because there is, so to say, a space within you which sees that actually these faculties are not yours. Yours in the terms of ahamkara. It is yours in the terms of Atman, the self, which is one with all other selves, but not in the terms of ahamkara. So that is the Vedantic glimpse. And there is one more shift into the Vedic paradigm, which is even deeper than this. And this what I will be presenting in the second part. But the shift, in that shift, I can clearly show on the treatment of the word, how the word was treated in the Veda. And also read to you few of quotations from Sri Aurobindo, which may explain to you what it means. For example, Sri Aurobindo says, the Veda is not logical. Does not really confute anything. Its method is experiential, intuitional. Its principle is to receive all experiences without systematization and explaining it to the outer mind too much in the systemic way, as what we do already in Vedanta. All perceptions of truth about the Brahman and either to place them side by side in order of experience and occasional relation, as in the Samhitas, or to arrange them in order of perception and fundamental relation, as in the Upanishads. So you see the distinction. In the Upanishads, there is already a systematization, whereas in the Veda, it's not important. So in the Upanishads, putting each in its place, correcting misplacement and exaggeration, but not excluding, not destroying. Harmony, synthesis, is the law of the Veda, not discord and a disjection of the members of truth in order to replace the many-sided reality of existence by a narrower logical symmetry of the mind. We are not ready for this knowledge. We are too mental. We need to feed the mind with logical input. But the metaphysical philosophies are compelled by the law of their being to effect precisely this disjunction. Veda can admit two propositions that are logically contradictory. Doesn't matter. Contradictory only logically, but not in reality of experience. So long as they are statements of fundamental experience and perception. It does not get rid of the contradiction by denying experience, but seeks instead the higher truth in which the apparent contradiction is reconciled. So it seeks the truth in which the reconciliation of these apparent contradictions takes place. It doesn't do it by the mind. It doesn't make an order with the mind. It just lifts up the consciousness to see where they are reconciled, on what level it is seen that they both are needed and true. Logic, by its very nature, is intolerant even of apparent contradiction. Its method is verbal, ideative. It accepts words and thoughts as rigid and iron facts, instead of what they really are, imperfect symbols and separate sidelights on truth. Being and non-being are ideas opposed to each other. Therefore, in logic, one or the other must be excluded. The language of the Shruti is remarkable. For example, he quotes, Asat ekam eva dvitiyam. Non-being one without a second. Now, for the logic, it's a paradox. How can non-being be one without a second? And what about being? But there is something else happening with this definition. And he goes, and shows that the old use of non-being differs from our idea of nothingness. The one cannot be at the same time the many. Therefore, in logic, either the many is an illusion or duality is the fundamental reality of things. Brahman is nirguna, without qualities, beyond definition. Therefore, to the rigid Advaitins, the Saguna Brahman, the infinite personality of God, becomes a supreme myth of Maya, a basic and effective fact indeed, but basic and effective only in and of the grand cosmic illusion which it directs. The battle is, finally, a civil strife between Vedantist and Vedantist, temporarily victorious over rival schools. They turn to rend each other. But the strife is still mainly about fundamental perception. The great question now is the fundamental unity or difference between the Supreme Soul and the individual or another, which would have astonished greatly the ancient rishis. The question whether the world is false or real. It would have astonished greatly the ancient rishis, this question, whether the world is false or real. False not only in its appearance to the senses, but per se, in itself, in its essence and its being. Thus it has come down to our own age, ever narrowing more and more, shorn of its victorious streams, awaiting its return to a wider flood and a more grandiose motion. So you can see how this huge ocean comes down to narrow and narrow and narrower streams of our thought and systematization, awaiting its return to a wider flood. So awaiting, what is that awaiting? What does it really do? Why it was necessary to narrow consciousness down to that? So that is the whole vision of the Veda and the Vedic knowledge of these cycles, starting Manvantaras, starting from Satya Yuga and narrowing down to Kali Yuga. What is really happening within that cycle? Why are we born young and fresh and naive and innocent, and then we grow old and become very stiff, and finally we cannot go on anymore and we have to drop our body? Why this takes place, this narrowing down constantly from a wider vision to the more narrow vision? This is the whole secret of our life here, these yugas. Yes, and it seems that we couldn't do it otherwise. It's not only that we didn't go wrong, because there was the whole scheme of things. It works this way. First we are born fresh with a fresh perception, and then we take more and more from the experience with the life which is less conscious, and we narrow down our concentration to, so to say, to spell it out in terms of manifestation. Most probably this individualization is taking place through this narrowing down of consciousness. We become more and more individuals, so that we have more and more individuals having less knowledge, but having access to the greater knowledge. Before it was a bit different in a way. Could be. I wanted to give you some quotations on the language which would confirm that what you say from Sri Aurobindo. Very interesting quotes. Here it is, yeah? The rishis' use of language, explains Sri Aurobindo, was governed by this ancient psychology of the word. When in English we use the word wolf or cow, we mean by it simply an animal designated. We don't mean anything else. We just point out to the object. We are not conscious of any reason why we should use that particular sound for the idea, except in the immemorial custom of the language. But we cannot use it for any other sense or purpose except by an artificial device of style. But for the Vedic rishis, vrika meant the terror, and therefore, among other applications of the sense, a wolf. Dhenu meant the fosterer, nourisher, and therefore a cow. But the original and general predominates. The derived and particular is secondary. So there was an original sense of the word, derivation from the most general meaning which was always applied into particular context to designate certain things. But it was not dependent on things. Nowadays we use language exactly opposite. We learn by heart what it means, why chair means chair and book means book. It doesn't say to you anything. If in Sanskrit it is grantha, it means a collection, from root grant, to collect. Grantha of pages or thoughts or ideas. It's a collection. It tells you what it does. Asanam or asanda means sitting place where you will rest or you be, from root as, to sit. That is not the case anymore in our conceptual languages. We are using meanings by memorizing them, applying them, nearly arbitrary. But it is not the case in Sanskrit language. So, because it is deriving its meaning from some other source of vibrations of those etymons in the system of Sanskrit language, which are in the systematic way present, the 1,000 sounds in the highest heaven. That's what is the explanation of the word. And all these sounds can come down and form the speech and create the language. And it is quite interesting, if you open Sanskrit dictionary, you will see, if you take I'm using this example because it's the most important for us, yoga. If you take the word yoga and look how many significances this word has in Monier-Williams dictionary, you will find that there are more than 150 significances given to the word. And it means everything. Usage, yoking, production, and so on and so forth. So how come that one word can create so many significances? By the way, when I was translating the treatises on different subjects, I was doing a treatise on precious stones. Somebody asked because they wanted to know what Indians, especially ancient Indians, thought about diamonds, and what was interesting for me, that when I saw the text first time, you can read it as any other text. You meet the same words, yoga and asana, and which mean different things because they are used in a different context. The same words will be used in mathematical text, the same words will be used in any other text, in psychology text, in philosophy text. And this word yoga, unfortunately I don't find the page, otherwise I would read you all the significance. You will be surprised what it can mean. Up to the, arranging armies for the before the attack, and so on and so forth, yoking the arrow into the bow, yoking the horses, yoking many things, because actually what root yuj means, it is derived from root yu, it means to hold two in one. And there are two meanings of root yu in two different classes. One is to unite, and other is to divide. Yuyodhi asmat juhuranam eno. Yuyodhi, so to say, deviate, separate from us. So this is the same root yu, And it's quite interesting, I thought about this. How come these two opposite meanings are in one word? But because this device of two in one, so to say, like this, yeah, can be applied in different directions. It can hold two in one, or it can show that the oneness is doubled. So basically, somewhere in the mind, there is this direct understanding of this device. It's a device. And you can imagine in how many contexts you can apply this device. In contextual meanings. You can create any word with it. Because everything, nearly everything what you do, may have some application from this device of holding something within. Yes? Yoking yourself to, uniting yourself with the higher spirit, concentrating, and so on, and so forth. So I'm just giving you a sense of that general meaning mentality which operates with general meanings, with the greater meanings, and is still free and still remembers where it comes from, and still utilizes that kind of consciousness to create words. Very different from ego consciousness operating with already given or conceptualized significances, which have already fixed meaning and cannot be altered. So we lost that mentality. But we didn't lose it forever, I guess. We can come back to it. Sri Aurobindo says on the Sanskrit language quite interesting things. In the sense that this of yoga at the beginning, he says that, by the way, it is due to the Sanskrit language that the whole tradition, Indian tradition, over more than 6,000 years, underwent this remarkable change. So all the paradigms, all the shifts of paradigms are expressed within one language. Can you imagine that? The language did not change. It's a miracle thing. Nobody can understand. Linguists are really puzzled. How come that over 6,000 years the language did not change? What was there so special about it? How it could really operate without change, without deviate from its own origin. And it is because of this system of etymons, system of simple root sounds, which are always productive, always creative of new words. With this system you can create another language and another language. There was a very interesting article by one academician from Russia, Toporov, who had who proposed to see Sanskrit as the always generating languages language. So all the prakrits are nothing but the utilization of this device. So once this projection of Sanskrit is taking place in the, so to say, normal environment, of the natural environment of when people speak, all the prakrits are nothing but these deviations from that origin. So all Indian, Indo-Aryan languages, Marathi, Hindi, Bharaj, Magadhi, Ardha Magadhi, all these, Bengali, Gujarati, Hindustani, all these are stages of that deviation. What you have now in Hindi, hai, you know, yes? Before it was hoti, and before it was bhavati. Sanskrit bhavati becomes in Hindustani hoti, and then it is even more reduced to hai. Bhavati hoti hai. The same thing over 200 years. I'm just saying to you how other languages are produced from this language. They are becoming natural. They are not, how to say, consciously dealing with their system of roots. They are not consciously involved in grammar. They are not conscious in their speech production, and that's why they deviate and become something else. Become Hindi, Bengali, and Marathi. And a very interesting example is Maharashtri Prakrit. To our Maharashtrian friends, it is the most deviating, most powerful. In dramas in the beginning of the millennium, last millennium, in the dramas, when somebody speaks Maharashtri Prakrit, it will be always... I will give you some examples. For example, what it could mean. I can even write that you will see.
This is the word.
Another word. Kawa. Kawa and is agata. This is the most disturbing, how to say, not disturbing, but distorting Prakrit. All the consonants in the intervocal position are dropped. It's a natural, how to say, way with which we are actually distorting words in time. You can see it even in English, American English, when people say water, 20. To disappears completely, 20. So it's no more 20. Yeah? It's a normal, natural way of reducing consonants in the intervocal between two vocals position. It is went to its extreme. There is no consonant at all, 3 vowels. And unless you know that, you would never be able to guess what it is. Kawa from Krishna is difficult to explain. So these are the natural processes which took place in Prakrits from the Sanskrit language and built the whole family of Indo-Aryan languages. But Sanskrit survived. Survived because it was always conscious of its derivations and the system of etymons.
Latin and Greek, what happened?
Same.
Latin stayed.
Same.
Greek stayed.
Nothing stayed. Latin doesn't stay. We have Italian language, we have Spanish, we have French. These are all Italian, so to say. Yes. And Greek also gave many influences for all the languages. We are using many Greek words as derivatory. We create with their etymologies, we create our words because we do not have them. No? So we create the whole scientific terminology with Greek and Latin words. It's an interesting phenomenon. Well, Greek and Latin is very close to Sanskrit in one particular regard. If you open Sanskrit dictionary and you read article after article, you will see that the meaning is changing gradually. It's an interesting exercise. You just take any Sanskrit dictionary, open it, and read article after article. You will see that the meaning is not jumping away. It is changing gradually as the sound is changing gradually. So the sound and meaning were related. The same happens in Latin dictionary and Greek dictionary. I checked, and it really works, and it is surprisingly systematic. But Latin and Greek languages, they lost the whole system of etymons. They have only certain etymons, selection of them, not the full set. And because of the alphabet, they were greatly confused. But these are things which are more linguistic, and I'm not sure that it is for all of you that all of you are interested in it. But I am greatly interested in these things. No, Latin is not living language anymore. Yes, it's used only for ceremonies and to read certain texts in the church and so on. But of course, there are people. I studied Latin also in the Department of English, so we had to study Latin 1 year.
Sanskrit, unfortunately, also not being a living language. Not tries to be right.
Yes, some people try and do very well. They can speak it and live, but it is not the same as it was 2,000 years back or more.
But it's much more a living language in the sense that it's still used in people debate in Sanskrit. It's still much more living. That's like there's regular literature that is being produced in Sanskrit. Not just now in the revival movement, even before that.
Yes, I would say that Sanskrit is more living language than any other language, and because of its ability to manifest languages. And if we would have that ability of the higher mind, we would be always, how to say, conscious and expressive of that higher mind in terms of language, in terms of the word. But we lost that ability. That's why we do not create. We do not speak in poetry, for example. We are very down to earth. We are operating by conceptual terms. We are using the mind. We are no more open to that higher capacity to generate and manifest words, to create new meanings which will be understood by others. This ability is somewhat left, somewhat is present with the poets, great poets. For example, they feel the difference between different synonyms or different words. Synonymia is also an interesting thing, why there are so many words for one meaning. Yes? And that's how do you know that it is the same or different? For example, big ocean or a huge ocean or immense ocean. Is it the same ocean, big and immense, or huge? Or they are different oceans? So these words, though conceptually they mean the same thing, in the sound value they mean very different things. They are produced from different etymons. These etymons came to this context to build up a contextual meaning, but they still have the memory of that etymon which it means. That's why we feel that a huge ocean is very different from big ocean. We feel, we cannot express it, we have to think about it, and we have no language to really explain it. But if we see deeper, we will see that they are drawn from different meanings, sounds meanings, and that's why they have different significance. I think we
so in Sanskrit there's a link between the sound and the meaning, and in Chinese there's a link between the visual image.
Very true. Very
Do you
true.
have any thoughts about that difference?
Yes. Chinese language is not verbal language. Maybe a few things I say. You will have the whole presentation tomorrow on the sound, root sounds by Sampat. He will give you his presentation on the same thing what I'm talking, but I am always talking a bit different about these things than him. So it's quite interesting that When Sanskrit alphabet was discovered, when first time scholars came from all over the world, from England, and started to collect data, it was a great shock for the scientific community in the West, because for the first time they saw the alphabet which was fitting into the, for Indians it's not a surprise. Kakha Gaghanga is not a surprise. But for the alphabet, Aleph, Bet thinking, A, B, C, D, it's a great surprise. So for the first time they saw a system which is articulatory system in a proper scientific way, selected and symmetrical and clear and productive of all the words. For the first time, so to say, Western mind saw the origin of speech. From here, from the discovery of Sanskrit, we have all new sciences in the West. Comparative philology, linguistics, Indo-European linguistics, all kind of comparative mythology, history, everything comes from the discovery of this unique system of articulation. And if I can show you on the whiteboard these simple sounds, I don't need a whiteboard. All gutturals, or all back tongues, kakha gaghanga, all palatals, cha-cha jajhanya, all dentals, cerebrals, tatha dadhana, all dentals, tatha dadhana, and all labials, papha babhama. 5 levels of articulation and all possible articulations. Touched, aspirated, touched, sound, voiced, aspirated, and nasal. Wait a minute, what is this? A, B, C, D doesn't say anything about anything. But kakha gaghanga, 5 chacha jajanya, tatha dadhana, tatha dadhana, papha babhama, yara lava shasha saha. Five vowels, a, I, ri, li, u. 5 semi-vowels, ha, ya, ra, la, va. 5 fricatives, ha, sha, sha, sa, fa. Look at the beauty. I'm just referring to you because for Indians and you, it's not knowledge. It's just they grew up with this. They never thought about this. What kind of system they have, what kind of transparency, and this system creates all possible roots. So in a way, it's for the first time the human mind from the West saw the possibility of clearly articulating sounds in a systematic manner. Moreover, all these sounds, all this system create the whole system of etymons. This is the first etymological simple system, which is meaningfully correlated. It's like a system of Mendeleev's system of chemical table. All of them meaningfully have relations among themselves. Or I can tell you the alphabet in different way. Kakha gaghanga, chi chi ji jhini, tri tri dri drinli, tli 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 dri drinli, pu pu bu bu mu. To be only on that level. I'm joking a bit, but still, what is interesting about this is that all the elements have a particular significance of varna, which is present in the roots, in the words. That's why when you read from article to article, meanings are not changing, not jumping, but gradually changing with the sound. This knowledge was lost for the rest of the world. It was available only in India. And that's why Sanskrit is so important. That's why Sanskrit was not lost over 6,000 years. And that's why we have still a chance to look into another structure, which is Vedic structure, which was more integral. So instead of speaking on the Vedic structure as spoken language, and in the second half I will speak on the Vedic structure.